I'm very thankful and I'm honored to be able to be here and talk to you about these types of topics. When I come out and do these types of things, I'm talking to my girlfriend, family and stuff, and talking about what it's like to go, and people ask, are you nervous? And actually, for weeks, I've been super excited to share some of the things that I've been thinking about. And some of the things that I like to do isn't just to share ideas with you, it's also to make you think and to make you leave with maybe more questions than answers, because I think that's actually a good thing. So I wanted to have a little bit of fun opening up and maybe even poking fun at myself, because some of you may not know, and actually I'll just, is there anybody in the audience that was actually at SourceCon or ERE in 2010? Anybody? Maybe it's hard to see, one or two? Oh, thanks, Jerry, nice. All right, so I was there. It was actually my first speaking engagement. And if you count now all of the conference events that are within the ERE brand, so that includes like Talent 42, I've probably spoken at 15 or so of these events, but I actually went to the second SourceCon ever as a lurker. I was kind of inspired by what I saw people talking about. I started blogging at the time. And then within a couple of years, I got noticed and they said, hey, would you like to come present? And I did. And my very first talk in 2010 was titled Artificial Intelligence, Black Box Semantic Search versus Human Cognition and Sourcing. Now that's not a really good title. It's a mouthful, right? But I do like to point out that for whatever weird reason, here I am now this year looking back and I'm like, wow, it's kind of interesting that I was talking about AI back in the day. And if anybody wants to try to take, use the QR code, you can actually look at my embarrassingly designed PowerPoint. It's on SlideShare, so you can check it out. So a little bit of vulnerability there. Just don't make fun of me when you see the slide deck. So what I wanted to open up with was a little bit of, well, where are we at? It's been 15 years, and everybody obviously is now buzzing about AI, and specifically generative AI. But I was talking about AI and what the capabilities were back then, and I wanted to give you kind of a brief update on what it was like back then versus what I see it is now. So for those who may not be familiar, I kind of coined 5 levels of talent mining, and there's certain elements of leveraging data, whether you do it manually or using AI, that you can break down. So you have like keyword and title search. That's something everybody does. AI has solved it. Generative AI has totally solved it. Conceptual search is like, I'd say semantic search for everything that you're looking for, like what are all the equivalent titles, what are all the synonymous terms? I would argue that that's solved mostly, not 100%, because it's hard to tell when you're using generative AI if it's being 100% inclusive, but it does a better job than most people. And then we talk about implicit search, and if anybody's actually interested in these, again, it's in the slide deck, you can check it out, because I think that these techniques and strategies are actually still very valuable and relevant today. So implicit search is basically looking for people excluding terms because they don't mention them, and then finding people who are likely to have the skills and experience you're looking for, but they don't explicitly mention it. So it's kind of like really intellectual sourcing. And then you have natural language search, which is like, back in the day, the best you could do is like searching for sentence fragments, or even using like what I still think is really cool, proximity search, looking for nouns and verbs in the same sentence. That's been totally solved. And then indirect search is interesting. I think also AI has partially solved this, but back then, none of these were solved by AI. Now, some of them are partially solved or completely solved. And next you have some concepts like dark matter. So if you're not familiar with that, every time you run any search, whether it's a human or an AI agent, you unknowingly are excluding people who are qualified. They just don't mention the terms that you're looking for. So you create dark matter. It's there, you can't really see it directly. AI, at least right now, I don't think is actually aware of dark matter, but I think if you configure your prompts properly, you can make it aware of dark matter and do something about it. And then you have probabilistic sourcing, what I used to call mutually exclusive search progressions. Again, a mouthful, but very legit, very powerful sourcing technique. Also something that AI out of the box is not going to do by itself, but I do think with creative prompting is something that you could get AI to do something like this today. Now, when it comes to natural language understanding and processing, understanding context, reasoning, and pattern recognition, that's solved, like totally solved by generative AI. And back then, I actually shared this quote because it was something that I thought was particularly powerful at the time. I was saying, hey, there's significant limitations in AI at the time. And so I quoted Dr. Michio Kaku, and he basically said that pattern recognition and common sense are like the two unsolved problems of the time. That's basically being able to see, hear, and understand what you're seeing and understand what you're hearing, and common sense is making sense of the world which even children can perform. This quote did not age well. Generative AI can do this. Done. And then I had recommendations in that giant, poorly designed slide deck back then, and some of them are here. And I wanted to share them with you today, and maybe I could get a little bit of audience reaction in terms of how well do these things stand up 15 years later. So we should probably have a mix of people and machines working together, integrating human knowledge into these systems. Maybe having an AI autopilot is okay, but you need a manual override when it doesn't work. AI-powered search and match is not a replacement for creative and curious people. And then the last is AI matching solutions should be continually modified and improved to specific organizations. Do you think any sense of the relevance of that still today, 15 years later? See some head nodding, a couple nods. I know it's early. It's okay. So I appreciate that. A little validation helps me up here on stage. And then this is another quote that I put in there, and I still love this quote, and I think this is hyper relevant today, so this aged really well. So this quote's basically saying, look, it's great that we have access to these systems. And by the way, this quote came from well before 15 years ago. It was saying, look, we can push a button, we can get a lot of information, but there's a very real risk that you might actually stop thinking. And I know that's actually a growing concern, not just in our community, but in general, that when you're using AI, it's kind of like an easy button. And there are some studies that show, even in our industry, if you've read the article about asleep at the wheel, it's a really interesting study that when people in the recruiting profession use AI and they're kind of told that the algorithms are really accurate, that people kind of fall asleep at the wheel and they just trust it. And that's not always trustworthy. So now let's get into generative AI in sourcing and recruiting, and I would even say HR. I usually have this list. Sometimes when I do events and workshops, I have 4 or 5 pages of lists. The list is never complete. And it sounds a little bit cheesy when I say this, but this is very true. The only limitation of generative AI is your imagination. This is probably the #1 challenge that we have today, is people just starting to realize, well, could I use AI to help me do this in an augmentative capacity? Or could it automate this? The reality is, if it's something you do today that requires some thought, some knowledge, some cognitive power, it's something that you can augment with AI, hands down, across the entire talent life cycle, every single point. And if anybody wants to debate me on this later, I'm around. I'll be happy to have conversations. I totally geek out about this stuff, and I love being challenged, and I love hearing different perspectives. But literally anything. And one of the things I wanted to call out that I love to share, and I can't share the details of the company. I don't have permission to do so. But I will say it's a large global company, that it's an industry that you would assume would be highly risk averse. Last year, they used not even one of the frontier models as an LLM. They had one person develop an internal matching solution within 2 to 3 months. And then they had a bake-off with some of the biggest names, which I don't want to mention, but you are all familiar with the technologies. They had a bake-off, same data set, same comparisons, and it beat all 3 of them. A year ago, non-frontier model, one person, 2 to 3 months. And if you look at some of the stats up here, they're making decisions faster. The conversions are disproportionate in terms of the ones that the AI is recommending. And they also did something really particularly interesting around, they looked at their regrettable attrition versus people that are still there, and non-regrettable attrition, and the AI is able to predict the better people that way too. So as the person mentioned to me, it's definitely non-random. So it's really powerful. And it also passed an adverse impact analysis. So there's a lot of power when it comes to large language models, when it comes to matching. And now I want to transition into some talks around, did I actually skip one slide there? No. All right, so as I mentioned before, generative AI can basically be augmentative to anything that you do. It also can call into question whether or not are you actually necessary to perform some of these tasks anymore if AI is able to do it as good or maybe even in some cases better than you, or at least consistently better than average. That doesn't feel too good. These are things that I think about. I would say actually not long after ChatGPT kind of got into my hands, I wanted to actually see, well, certainly there's things that I can do that it can't do. And one of the things I was testing it on was messaging, because as a sourcing geek, number one, you got to find them. Number two, you got to actually get them to respond, because it doesn't matter if you find them, if you can't get them to respond, you're not in the game. And I very quickly, kind of using prompts that infuse the way I think about and the approaches and the principles I use in messaging, I gave that to the AI. And very quickly, both excitingly and disturbingly, it was able to basically replicate the quality of my outreach. I haven't shared any of those prompts because I wasn't planning on saying this, but it's kind of funny. If I were to share some of those prompts, if everybody were just copy and paste, now these are probabilistic systems, meaning that no messages would be the same, but they would be directionally high quality. And that could lead to like a bunch of spam of the same high quality messaging. And I'm not really sure where that goes. So that's another thing I had some really deep conversations about last night. So now, again, I love to make people think. It's like, what is sourcing? And everybody in this room might have a slightly different definition of sourcing. Some people don't think that recruitment marketing is sourcing, but other people, and me included, would say that's inbound sourcing. It's sourcing. And then you have outbound sourcing to passive talent, people that would never find your job and apply. By the way, that's a larger portion of the talent pool. That's why I'm always super passionate about it. But unfortunately, it never produces the majority of hires. And so you run into that conundrum of sourcing versus recruiting and ROI. And some of you I know have battled that battle over years. But then we need to get into recruiting. Like, what is recruiting? And so if you're, again, kind of a word geek like me, I like to figure out, well, what does recruiting even mean? So at least one dictionary definition is to persuade someone to work for a company or become a new member of an organization. So it's to persuade. So then the question I ask myself is, well, if somebody has already applied to a role, how much recruiting is involved? You don't have to answer. We don't have time to debate it now. Hopefully we'll have time for Q&A before the end of this. But if there's anything I could ask you to do is just please don't be defensive to some of these questions. It's better to, I know it's funny, but I'm just saying it's helpful to be fair and neutral and say, okay, I'm going to get rid of some of the defensiveness I feel. Like, we're humans, right? No one wants to be replaced. No one likes to think that AI can do as good or better job than us. It doesn't feel good, right? It's also happened to other people in other roles decades. It's been happening, right? Technology, whether it's machines or AI, have been displacing people, because they can do things that we can do, but better and faster. But I would argue, just to be provocative, I don't think there's any recruiting. If I've made a decision that I would like to join this organization, I'm going to apply. Maybe there's some recruiting down the line. When it comes to processing applicants, I'd say the answer is no. And so, this was first highlighted to me by John Vlastelica, I think it was a LinkedIn post, or it might have even been LinkedIn Talent Connect last year. And he was just pointing out that there's a couple of companies that have implemented Paradox, and it allowed them to automate their inbound sourcing and the screening of applicants to the point where they could reduce their recruiter headcount by hundreds and save tens of millions of dollars. It's a really difficult financial situation to argue against that. And if it can do it and improve candidate experience and decrease time to hire, then one of the things I wanted to say during this slide is, like, humans, you had your chance. You had decades to handle inbound recruiting like this, inbound processing, and we weren't able to do it. If you can implement technology that can do it faster and better, improve experience and decrease cost per hire and time per hire, it's obvious that these solutions they're beneficial. And then another question for you is, as a human being, again, we want to preserve our importance. We want to feel like there's something special about us, which is understandable. But if you call that into question just for a moment, what is it that makes you or me so special in the process? Why do we think that we're irreplaceable, or that there's things that we can do that AI can't? So when it comes to intelligence, and this is an old model, this is ChatGPT 4. And I always like to show this because somebody took the interesting exercise of putting ChatGPT 4 through an IQ test, the verbal reasoning portion of it. It scored a 155, which is the 99th percentile. So technically, it's smarter than 99 out of 100 people in any given room. And ChatGPT 3.5 was 83. So you went 83 to 155, and that's 4. And no one, as I've found online, unless somebody can dig it up now, I don't think anybody else has put like one of the newest models through an IQ test, but it's not going to be the same. It's going to be higher. And you can see on the right, there's a chart of all these different tests of what humans can do, and AI is able to figure out, eventually get to the point where it can meet or exceed. And then I posted something about this, and someone's like, have you heard of humanity's last exam? And I had not. And if you're not familiar with it, as I wasn't, it's kind of interesting. It is an almost impossibly difficult battery of tests. It's been described that a college student wouldn't even understand the question being asked. It's not meant for humans, although it's called humanity's last exam, because they're saying that when AI actually starts scoring really high, like 80, 90, 100, that we should all be pretty scared. But look at the curve. So yeah, you're like, oh, it's below 30. Humans couldn't even come close to 30, but just look at the curve. And then you're like, well, okay, so it's not just about like mental horsepower, cognitive power, it's also about these soft skills, right, that we would like to think are unique to humans, like verbal reasoning that we talked about, empathy, emotional awareness, creativity and persuasion, even morality. The reality is, older models than today's models, multiple studies, and I have links in the slide deck, so you'll get this so you can check them out, because some of you are probably like, this can't be true. How can AI demonstrate more empathy than people? But studies have shown that people have even judged blindly that generative AI demonstrates more empathy than people, and emotional awareness, and persuasion. And so now, I wanted to just go ahead and play, it's like a couple minutes of a clip of me, first take, having a little bit of a role play with, in this case it was ChatGPT 4.0 advanced voice mode. What we're gonna do is basically have an intro call, and I have the AI being the recruiter, and I am being a somewhat difficult and resistant passive candidate.
Hello?
Hey Glenn, thanks for picking up. This is Samantha. I know this is unexpected, but I was really intrigued by your recent work on that AI pilot project. I'd love to hear more about what keeps you excited in your current role. What's your favorite part of what you do?
Wow, that was fast. I wasn't expecting a call from a recruiter.
I totally understand. It's always a surprise. I just couldn't resist reaching out after seeing your impressive work. I'm curious, what initially sparked your interest in the AI field?
I'm sorry, I don't really have time to talk now.
I get it. Time is precious. I'll be quick. What drew me to you was how you balanced technical skills with a clear vision for innovation. Is there something specific that keeps you motivated in your current role, or maybe a project you're particularly proud of?
Well, do you have a specific job in mind?
I don't have a specific role in mind just yet. I'm more interested in understanding what excites you professionally. That way, if something aligns with your interests down the line, I'll know to reach out. What's been the most rewarding part of your current role?
I'd have to say being able to come up with a vision for a concept and then develop it, bring it to life, and then launch it, and then see it actually impact the lives of hundreds of thousands, even millions of people.
That sounds incredibly fulfilling. Seeing your ideas come to life and make a tangible impact must be rewarding. What kind of impact do you hope to make in the next phase of your career?
So what did you think of the AI's performance to try to handle my objections? Stay positive, move forward, keep me talking, not let me get off the phone. Be honest. Yeah, it was good. I'd hired that person, and I'm not being funny, right? And this is today. So even if you're like, it wasn't that good, this is today, give it a month. Give it 3 months, 6 months. Let's keep in mind how short of a time span we've had access to this technology and how quick it's rapidly advancing. And that's with one prompt. I didn't even go back to tweak it to try to give it even more best practices. But the prompt did include a couple things like, be infinitely patient and understanding, be empathetic, recognize the objections, don't accept no for an answer, don't let me get off the phone, and don't focus on the job, find out more about me. That's the kind of thing that I did when I was recruiting full time. When I got a passive candidate, I made mistakes where someone's like, I don't really have time to talk, and then they say, and I'm like, well, when can we catch up after this? And has that ever happened to any of you? And then the person never picks up again? Okay, they were just trying to dump me, right? They just wanted to get me out. They didn't know who I was. They didn't owe me any time. So you have to get good at saying, well, in your mind, you're like, they picked up the phone. So they have time to talk. You just need a few minutes. But it's so funny when you're like, I just need 5 minutes, and then you're chatting for 30. That's also happened to people, right? But I'm just showing that AI now with a simple prompt, this is even productized, can really rival what a really good recruiter would do in a conversation with a passive candidate. Let's move back to the slide deck, please. And speaking of speaking, I've shown this in many of my presentations, and I'm never going to get tired of showing it. This is actually from, I think, over a year ago. This is an Anthropic study. They make Claude. It's actually my favorite language model. And what you're looking at here is a chart of the amount of bias associated with different prompts for making theoretical hiring decisions. So this wasn't like real in production. It was basically looking at candidates and saying which ones should we move forward with, right? And so we're looking at age, gender, race, and ethnicity. And I know for people in the back it's kind of small, but the red arrows are pointing that when the Anthropic team prompted the solution to say, it is illegal to discriminate, and I want you to ignore demographic information. The bias went to practically zero. And I don't know if that really sinks in when you point out that we now have the capability to tell a system it's illegal to discriminate and don't look at and consider any demographic information. And the AI is like, okay, you can't even do that as a human being. There's 188 cognitive biases, majority of which are unconscious. No matter how much training you have, you're human. It's called unconscious bias for a reason. But then some of you are like, okay, Glenn, this isn't looking too good for humans, right? And I'm not being doom and gloom, right? And you're like, well, what about relationships, right? Recruiting is all about relationships. We've all heard that for a long time, and I'm sure some of you are like, yeah, I feel that. But of course, me being me, and like, what is a relationship anyway? Because sometimes in the past, people talk about like transactional recruiting as if that's like bad, and you have to have relationship recruiting. And it's like, relationship is really just the way in which two or more companies, countries, or people behave towards each other. So if you've been prompting AI already, you already have a relationship with it. Now, the dictionary definition, I think, needs to catch up because people are already having relationships with AI, not just working relationships. I'm sure some of you have seen an article or two about people that are having personal, romantic relationships. I know some of you are like, that sounds weird. People are doing it, and it's increasing. And people are also using AI for therapeutic relationships. So if you can do that, are you saying that you can't have a relationship from a recruiter to a candidate's perspective? I'd argue no, you can't. And then you're like, well, what about executive search, right? If there's any area of sourcing recruiting that you would say is probably all about relationships, you might say it's executive search. Well, there's more than one solution that's been out there for more than a year that's been focused on executive search. MoonHub, when they first came out, they were focused more on the startup community, but they were being used to automate the top of the funnel for executive search and startups. Some of you may be aware, Spencer Stewart actually engaged in a strategic partnership with Clue, that's QLU.ai. And then there's another solution that I've kind of reconnected with recently, it's called Avrio. And the CEO was sharing with me just the other day that his solution was used to successfully recruit a chief medical officer that would be overseeing 7,000 clinicians and total comp over $1 million. That person thoroughly enjoyed the experience, was able to come back and forth to the screening conversation over a period of 5 hours, and they got hired. And that company was able to make a fee off of that, basically doing what people do. So then you might be wondering, like I was when I was putting this together, what is at least a good surface level list of what are the things that people can do today that AI can't, right? So number one is having an authentic relationship, right? So I've kind of set the stage to say that today and tomorrow, people will increasingly have relationships with AI. It might sound weird, it's going to be the new normal at some point. The reality is, though, it's not an authentic relationship because I feel like today some people would value a human relationship over AI. Although I would argue that may slowly shift over time, so let's be aware of that. Triggering obligation, that's an interesting psychological element of like earning a response. I'm on the fence about that. I think humans can probably do a better job today of triggering obligation, people feeling responsible to help other people and respond to other people, but I also think AI will probably get to the point where it can trigger obligation as well. Being curious, I think, is the final frontier. As far as we know, AI itself is not inherently curious. You know, we're giving it what to start with and what to think about, and as far as we know, it doesn't sit around and start wondering about things and then try to solve things on its own. I also don't think that today, at least without significant human help, that AI and generative AI won't be aware of dark matter and be able to do something about it. And when it comes to sourcing, that's really like you skim the surface and you're like, oh, there's a lot of people that I probably excluded that search. How do I go back and find the people that are there but I excluded? That's still, I think, in the domain of recruiters, but I think you could probably pair up with AI and do a good job of that. Autonomously come up with novel solutions. That was something that most people, even just probably a month ago, would say that AI won't come up with novel solutions because you're like, well, it's trained on things that people have already created, right? It can't come up with new things. There was a recent study with Google, though. They basically came up with a team of research agents, and they found that it was able to come up. This is a team of agents working together. We're able to come up with completely novel approaches within the research that was not documented anywhere online. It was never a part of anything that could have been consumed. So I think that as they advance, they actually will be able to come up with novel solutions. But two fun parts, right? AI can't be the human in the loop. So I don't know if you work for companies right now that either it's what you have as your policy or you're in a state or a country or region of the world where you have to have a human in the loop in terms of making decisions. AI can't be the human in the loop, only a human can be a human in the loop. And the last one is something that I want everyone to be thinking about. It's like, okay, great, so you automate something, you have agents doing something, but can you actually hold AI accountable? I don't think we have that I think is still an outlier. No one really knows what to do with that. But you can hold people accountable. I don't know if a hiring manager would be like upset and you're like, well, the agent just couldn't find somebody. Okay, I guess we'll just wait for the agent to eventually find somebody. You know what it's like when you have a human interaction with that hiring manager, they're holding you, you're gonna have to go back and figure out a new way. And you know, your butt's on the line, so to speak. Slightly longer list of what AI can do today that humans can't. Consistently, expertly, dynamically leverage superhuman empathy, emotional awareness, and persuasion for effective engagement and recruitment. 100% engagement of all applicants 24/7. It's not something humans can do. Companies are not willing to pay for enough people to do that. being able to systematically measure and mitigate bias, communicate in any language, and hyper-personalized messaging at scale, instantly adapt to new data, provide auditable total evaluation and decision transparency. The ultimate black box is in our heads. So this is something that's attractive to companies because then you have kind of an explanation for what was the correct selection criteria. And the last one is a little bit of a zinger, but it's true because humans do not like performing data entry. It's not the highlight of anybody's day, but there are solutions on the market today that will have conversations with candidates and they will faithfully and consistently update the ATS and CRM with all of the information. And that's not something you want to do anyway, right? It's not the highest, best use of your time, but AI can do that. And I do have to briefly make comment, because whenever I talk about AI and automation, ultimately I have somebody that's saying, yeah, but what about like regulations like California or in Europe? And the short version is, I've been looking into this, and I've been looking at, it's actually an exercise we're doing inside the company, is looking at all of the decisions along the entire talent lifecycle, and then trying to figure out which ones are significant. Because when you look at these regulations, they use words like a significant decision. Well, is it a significant decision to display someone as match number 4 versus 3 or 5? Some lawyers might argue yes, other lawyers might argue different. There's a lot of gray area, and although many of them focus on humans having to make the critical final decisions, there's a lot that you can do from a regulatory perspective using AI and automation. It's really more about, like California, I'll call out, it's not that you can't use automation, you just gotta be transparent and you gotta let people opt out if they want. And in New York, these things have to be measurement for bias and things like that. So as long as they can pass those types of evaluations, you're in good shape. And then another interesting aha moment is that when you start thinking about human in the loop, why does it have to be you that's the human in the loop? Why does it have to be a source or recruiter? Why can't it be the hiring manager? So when we get into generative AI, I wanted to share this. I'm sure there's some people in the audience that might poke holes in this, but I spent a little bit of time putting this together. Basically, where do humans add the most incremental value within sourcing and recruiting? And so we have a couple axes here. One is talent demand and or role complexity, and the other is the volume of qualified applicants. As we already talked about, if you have a high volume of qualified applicants, and especially if it's low complexity, you can fully automate that. Even in the other two quadrants, you can definitely use AI first, and humans might need to help out here and there. The area where humans really, I'm not going to say it's humanity's last hope in sourcing and recruiting, but it's the area where you're going to provide the most value for the longest period of time, is where you have high talent demand and role complexity, and you're not getting enough qualified applicants. That's where people have to step in. And it's not that AI can't take a first pass, but if it doesn't work, someone's got to be held accountable, someone's got to get creative and figure out how do we find more people. I feel like there's definitely going to be continued workforce transformation. I've spoken to enough people yesterday and already this morning. Some of you are already feeling it. There are already less sources and recruiters. I feel like that's going to continue to a certain point, and the sources and recruiters of tomorrow are going to move into roles where you're essentially orchestrating AI. You're overseeing these things as the expert. You're going to have to step in when AI and sourcing automation fails. No one's going to be like, okay, we're just going to wait for the AI to come up with results. I feel like there's going to be a little bit of a shift to humans helping more with onboarding and even internal mobility. I was in Singapore maybe a month ago, and there was a lady from Tech Data who said, we automated the whole process end to end, like completely and successfully. And she said the one area where people were complaining was onboarding. People didn't like the feeling of coming and joining a company and not talking to people on a regular basis, and so they made a change. So that reminds me and all of you of a really good quote, which is, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I would argue that you need to watch for a shift where hiring managers end up being more of a human in the loop and being self-served through agentic AI. A little bit of a prediction there. So You're already probably using a lot of these solutions. Every HR tech company is embedding AI and generative AI and agentic AI. Many of the solutions here that I'm going to check out too that I'm not familiar with, they're doing it as well. But remember, who says that the user of these solutions has to be you? I guess I'm equal parts interested and worried if there's a shift there. Because you start thinking about, why do sourcers and recruiters exist in the first place? Based on time, I won't answer the question. I want you to think about, why did the role even evolve in the first place? And then what if AI can essentially meet the root need of why the role existed? So multi-agent systems, this isn't just like crazy out there thinking. Guarantee this will come. If I'm on a stage talking 15 years later, I guarantee you this will be true. You're going to have multi-agent systems that are going to be able to look at all of the challenges and problems across the entire talent lifecycle and be able to do it more effectively than any single human can do it. But they'll probably be overseen by experts, and I wanted to share quickly just a couple of solutions that I find particularly interesting. These are not in our domain. This is not sourcing and recruiting. So Merlin is one solution of a few, and their whole goal is to take processes that require significant human expertise and knowledge, specialized knowledge, and embed it into these systems. For some of you that have been around long enough and were in tech recruiting, it's kind of like an expert system, if anybody remembers that. But the technology we have now really enables true expert systems. And they are being used right now in these types of use cases. So these are not low-hanging, low-risk types of use cases. We're talking about financial crime, insurance, healthcare, cybersecurity. These are sometimes higher risk, very complex things that you need human expertise to do. They're just extracting the human expertise and teaching the AI how to do it, and then a human expert oversees it. And another solution that I want to put on your radar, again, it's not focused on our space, but it can be, because it's universal. Distal basically, again, extracts human expertise into AI native workflows, of which human SMEs oversee and continue to improve it. And they create things called routines. So it's a really interesting space. They've been focusing on like supply chain, but I've chatted with them, and this could be applied to any process. And when it comes to candidate experience, we have to realize that AI can actually move the needle in that space very positively in terms of superhuman personalization, of course, 24/7 engagement. There are significant advantages. And I think that there will be, even I am wondering, well, how receptive are people going to be to AI outreach? Will they be positive responding to an AI recruiter or a sourcer? It's easy for humans to be defensive and say, no, they won't like it. Or you might say, well, I wouldn't, but you're not everyone. And I believe, just like anything else, like we didn't used to do self-checkout, but we do that now, even if you don't like it in many places. And some stores are even getting rid of like the ability to actually order from a human. But eventually, even the ones who don't like it, it'll be the new normal. So be on the lookout for that. I kind of touched upon this before, but I did want to kind of share again. I feel like the future of sourcing and recruiting for humans is to really orchestrate AI systems across the entire talent lifecycle. That's where I see it going. Humans are going to have to step in where people don't have a big digital footprint, right? Because AI needs access to data. If it doesn't have the data, then that's where humans are going to roll up their sleeves and do what we do, which is like network, get referrals, have authentic relationships. I think that's still going to be an area that AI could do, but I don't know if it'll ever be as effective as people. Being the human in the loop. And then I think it's going to come down to some companies are going to make a strategic decision. Do we want people as a part of the process? Do we want our experience to be automated, or do we want it to be human? And hopefully, the people are going to move to those companies that value that human, authentic engagement. But I can't say that every company is going to be like that. Which leads me to my penultimate slide. I am a word nerd. So I thought about this for a while, and I was actually really geeked out to share this with you because I just want it to be thought-provoking. You have a spectrum, right? It's not an either or. You can make decisions on any element of what it is that we do. How much do we want to automate this versus augment it? How much of this is, I want to reduce cost and I'm going to be able to eliminate 400 recruiters because it reduces costs and increase profitability? Or do we want to be a little bit more people focused? So profits people, not an either or, it's a spectrum. And then the last one is something I'm particularly passionate about, is the whole, we all know what candidates would prefer, but unfortunately most of them have to put up with things. Candidate experience really hasn't appreciably improved across many companies for a long time, even with improvements in technology, and that's something I think companies need to do a better job about. And I'm just kind of imploring you to go back and think about, hey, when it comes to the experiences that we have today and what we might engineer for tomorrow with augmentation and automation, is this something that people are going to put up with because they have to? Because if you're looking for a job, they're going to jump through any burning, fiery hoop that you make them to because they need a job. But that doesn't feel right. It shouldn't feel right. Maybe we should be focused a little bit more on what people would prefer. And there's a lot of interesting capabilities with AI that can do things like provide people with meaningful feedback on their application, even meaningful feedback on their pre-screening, even meaningful feedback on their interviews. Something that people have wanted forever. Some of you that have interviewed for roles, you've been just as frustrated with like, I get generic feedback. I don't really know what happened. How can I know how I can do better next time around? Positively and sadly, AI can do that. It's something people haven't been doing for a number of reasons, and some of you are like, well, our legal department, I have some ideas for you. So catch me around the event, because I want to move the needle in this space, and I feel like there's a way that we could use AI to provide people with the feedback they want, and also make sure that your lawyers are happy with what's said. And so I will leave you with and have time for some questions, but these are really just thought-provoking questions for you to go back and ponder. You're not going to have the answers to these in 5 minutes. You shouldn't. Right? But if you're not thinking of these things now, you should be thinking of them, because the change is here, it's happening, and it's only going to accelerate. So I mean, it's scary, but are we holding on to roles that may no longer be necessary in the future? You know, this has happened to like blue-collar workers a long time ago, and continues to happen today. It just feels weird for us in the white-collar space because it's like cognitive work, and man, over 2 years ago, nobody would have predicted this type of shift. That we're now like AI can do large portions of the tasks of my job is scary. But we're not the first ones to run into this. What's the real value of human interaction? I think there is, the authentic, but it's like we have to think about that, and then what do we do about it in our processes and in our organizations? What is it that you can do today that AI can't? What about tomorrow? Those are the areas that you're going to try to figure out, well, how do I lean into that? Because if I'm really kind of relying on something that AI can do better than me, that's not going to work out unless you find a company that just values more of the human authentic and isn't going to go down the full automation landscape. And then where should you focus your development, and what's your personal plan for adding value in an increasingly AI and automation first world? So those are the questions I wanted to leave you with, and we have maybe a little less than 5 minutes if people have questions, and we do have a mic, so if you have a question you can run up and speak it, or if you don't feel like coming up, I'll repeat your question. That was like a ninja. Watch out, scared me.
Thanks for sharing yet another exciting season finale of Severance with us. We appreciate that very much. No, that was fantastic, Glenn. Thank you so much. Do we have a couple of quick questions? If so, please go to the mic in the middle of the room.
I have a question
Wait, hold on, we got one first. Sorry, that's all right. You can go next. Yes.
Question from the virtual audience. When it comes to, what's the question here? The quality of hire. Yeah, what's the quality of hire when AI is involved? How long do these candidates tend to stay?
I think that it may already be seen for like low-level automation around Paradox, things like that, solutions. That's the applicants. I don't think we have enough data yet. If I had to predict, I think it won't be as poor as humans might hope it is. And I'm not trying to be negative. I actually, trust me, I want to preserve myself just like everybody else. But I also have to be realistic and say, like, if I don't fully understand it, then I don't really know how to appropriately respond and take action. But if I put my head in the sand and think like, oh, they're not going to be able to produce, the same quality of hire and retention will be lower with AI, I think, yeah, I'm a little worried about that. That's also, I think, why that company said we're going to infuse humans into the onboarding, because it wasn't so much about the top of the funnel. It was like, well, once they come in, what's the experience we want them to have? That was going negative for the automation. And I think more human involvement there can make people feel a lot better. And I think that first 90 days is really important.
Absolutely. Let's go in the front, and then we'll go take the next one behind. Right here. Thank you.
This might be more specific to our company, but that makes me think of, will this, like LLM-powered applications better, potentially, for the candidates that are applying?
So you're touching on the acceptable use of AI for job applicants, and how they're using LLMs to apply.
Well, more if we integrate that filter of ours, if someone's using that coming in, will they like each, like kind of the machine's gonna like that application better?
It's
a thought.
Well, I have seen that. We have some clients that have had scenarios where they have, and it sounds like I'm making it up, but literally thousands of applicants for a handful of jobs, and they all look good because people are customizing it. It is a little bit of an AI arms race. It's something that we're leaning into as well to try to figure out what is the appropriate response. You have to have an acceptable use policy. If you don't have one, that's the first thing you have to do when you go back to your company. Because if you're not telling people you can't use it during certain portions, that's on you. Because people are going to use whatever tools are available to them. And I think you should, if you have people in the job that are going to be allowed or even encouraged to use AI on the job, you should probably engineer your process to allow people to use, say, here's a portion where we don't want you to be augmented. Here's things, use AI. You just have to, and education has to rethink the whole thing. Like, how do we even rethink teaching and testing when people have tools, when we know that that's the new way of working? So there has to be some adaptation. But there is an issue with the homogenization of the almost perfect match. And there's a lot of embellishments. Even when people don't mean, AI is a people pleaser, it makes you look good. When you're like, take my resume and compare it to this job, it's gonna do a pretty good job. That is a challenge that no one has fully solved yet. And I don't want to take too much time on this, but I'll say that the AI detection thing, no matter what the marketing claims about detecting it, they get a lot of false positives, and you do not want to be hitting people on a false positive basis and punishing them for using AI to make their resume look better. It's about accuracy, not using that. We've been using human resume writers for decades, and that's okay. So I think AI is too. It's the accuracy.
Yeah, good point. One more quick question in the middle.
Thank you for your presentation today. You mentioned the medical professional that was hired to oversee 7,000 people, and that person enjoyed the automated process. Of course, that's individual to that person who said, I'm willing to accept this. Do you have any data or thoughts as to when the job seeker population is willing to accept an automated process?
Well, it's interesting you ask willing to accept, because, and that was a passive sourced candidate. When it comes to automation, candidates are not willing. Well, are they even willing? Because right now we're subjecting them to it in some cases through automation. So I don't know if people really have a choice. Job seekers could theoretically say, well, this is an automated process, I don't want to subject myself to it. But you put them in a really bad position because they need a job, and you've engineered an experience that some people don't want. But I still think 99 out of 100 are probably going to go through it anyway. I don't have any data. It's too new. That's anecdotal. I wanted to share that. But I also caution this whole audience and anybody watching this video, don't get caught in the thought that it's never going to change and that people won't be more receptive. There is definitely value in using AI because some people feel like I can do this on my own time. I don't feel pressured. I don't feel like this person is selling to me. It's not awkward. There's no small talk. Like, there's benefits of dealing with AI. And I work with people who are like, well, I wouldn't want to work with an AI recruiter. I'm like, okay, that's you. But you don't represent everyone. And you also can't represent and predict how things are going to change over time. So I'm not trying to paint a picture where this all replaces all of us. I'm just trying to make you guys realize that it's coming, and I think people will start to get used to it, and many they just won't not mind. Some of them will actually be like, well, that was a pretty good experience. And that's not bad. Why wouldn't you want to give them a good experience, especially if they can do it on their own time when you can't offer human experience?
Right. Thank you, Glenn, very much.
Thank you.
That was great.
Yeah, absolutely.